Chapter 54, 3rd year. Marlene. "So, summer?" James asked, over butterbeers and the Three and Broomsticks on their last Hogsmeade weekend before exams. Sirius and Remus groaned in unison. "You know I can't," Remus started. "They'll never let me," Sirius finished. "I don't see why, though," James replied innocently. "You both came for Christmas." "Yeah, but there's some rule about me staying at St. Edmund's for the whole summer," Remus shrugged. "While I'm there, I have to follow Muggle law. You don't get to visit anyone when you're in care, unless they're related." "And you know what my lot are like," Sirius sighed heavily. "Even after Christmas. And I think that was just to keep me out of the way, to be honest. Reg already told me I'm expected." "When did you speak to Regulus?" James looked up, surprised. Sirius shifted slightly on his stool, looking awkward. The other day. Wasn't worth mentioning. Only saw him for a minute." "I'll be there all summer, James," Peter said loudly. Sirius rolled his eyes rather obviously, but James smiled and patted Peter's knee. "Yeah, great, mate. Least I'll have you, huh?" "I might be able to swing a Diagon Alley trip," Sirius said, perking up slightly. "I've thought about it, and if you brought the invisibility cloak, then we might be able to work something out." The three of them began to chat excitedly about this plan. Remus let them. Ever since he'd put a stop to the Animagus initiative, Marauders had been at a bit of a loose end. They needed something to use their creative energy on, and it generally had to be at least mildly illegal. "Moony," James said suddenly, "where is St. Edmund's exactly?" "Epping Forest," Remus supplied promptly. "Why?" "We could always come and visit you." "No." Remus said this with such forcefulness that Sirius and Peter's heads snapped up, alarmed. Remus swallowed dryly. "Just don't, okay? It's a bad idea." His inside churned. The humiliation he would feel when his friends saw how he lived, where he came from. It would be too much to bear. What would they say when they saw his dull grey Muggle clothes, or the other boys' rough face and hard knuckles, the concrete blocks and the splintering porter cabins, and the scrubby patch of grass out front? They would pity him. "All right," he said hurriedly, hoping to allay them. "And you lot can tell me everything you get up to. Hopefully I can come visit yours at Christmas again, Potter." "You might not," Sirius said suddenly. "Full moon's on the 29th this December." Remus looked at him oddly. He prided himself in having an excellent memory, but Sirius took the cake when it came to the moon cycles. James laughed. "How come you've memorised every bloody full moon until we're 50, but you can't get above an acceptable in astronomy?" "Some things are important to remember. Some things aren't," Sirius shrugged, draining his tankard. "And messing up the constellations really annoys my parents. So..." Mid-May 1974. Remus yawned and closed his book. He'd done plenty. More than enough. Too much if you were to ask Sirius. But then, it was all very well if you were lucky enough to already have wealthy dead relatives. Someone with Remus's prospects couldn't afford to slack off. The library was open for extended hours during the exam period, but even so, it was almost closing time, with only a few much older students left behind, blinking sleepily at their texts. Lily, Mary and Marlene had gone to bed at least an hour ago, or Remus thought so anyway. The days had become very repetitive in the lead-up to the end of term, and time no longer felt truly linear. He hadn't even been outside in days. Wearily, he stood up, rubbing his eyes, and carried a pile of books back towards the study of magical creatures shelves. He found that he could stay on Pince's good side if he tidied up after himself, and it wasn't much effort. He liked being in the library late. It was nice and quiet. Growing up in a boys' home and sharing a bedroom with the Marauders had given Remus precious few opportunities for peace and quiet. As he turned around the final row of stacks, he caught sight of a small figure slumped at the end, fast asleep over a single desk. Tiptoeing forward, he recognised the fan of blonde hair splayed over pages of an open book. "Marlene," he whispered as he got closer. "Marlene." He tapped her shoulder gently. She jumped violently, fast enough to give Remus whiplash, then stared about, with confused, bleary eyes. "Remus?" "You fell asleep," he explained, keeping his voice low. "Library's closing soon." "Oh no!" She looked distraught, gazing down at her parchment, which was blank. She'd smeared a bit of ink at the top, but nothing more. "Oh no," she said again, forlorn. "It's okay." Remus tried to cheer her up. "You obviously needed the rest. Still some time before exams start." "I've got so much revision to do. I can't remember anything about Krups. Can you?" "Come on." Remus dodged the question. "We'd better go, or Pince'll be after us." Marlene nodded dazedly and got up, letting him lead her through the maze of bookshelves. As they left, she began muttering to herself. "Krups have forked tails, are wary of muggles, and somewhat resemble cocker spaniels." "Jack Russells," Remus corrected without thinking. "What? Really? Are you sure?" The girl grabbed his arm, unreasonably panicked by this information. Yeah?" Remus said, reeling back, unable to get away from Marlene's vice-like grip. "Of course you're sure," she said woefully, finally letting him go. "You're the best in the class." "You're very good too," Remus began, but stopped. Marlene's face crumpled and she burst into tears. "I can't do it. I'm going to fail everything," she wailed loudly. A group of Slytherins passed by, snickering at her, before Remus pointed his wand menacingly at them. Marlene, still weeping, threw herself at Remus, arms around his neck, and she sobbed onto his shoulder. Taken aback, Remus tried to pat her, gently, as her tiny body shook against him. He'd never been hugged by a girl before, except James's mum, and that was hardly the same thing. He didn't like it. His shoulder was getting wet. Marlene was so completely oblivious to his awkwardness, however. "I'm so rubbish," she sniffed. "I mess up everything. I'm never going to be as good as Danny or Mum or you or Lily." You're better than Mary But Mary's got a boyfriend and everyone fancies her and no one likes me," she cried even harder. At this point, Remus decided that he was definitely in over his head. He patted her, awkwardly once more, and said, "I'll, go get Lily, shall I?" No, it's okay." Marlene pulled away, still sniffling. Her usually pale face was now red and blotchy. Her grey eyes were glistening. "I'll just go and wash my face." She gestured toward the nearest girl's loos. "Will you wait for me?" Okay." She disappeared, and Remus slumped heavily against the wall. He now found himself carrying both of their book bags, and his shoulders ached under the weight. What might the others do in this situation? James would be chivalrous, of course. He probably would have known exactly what to say to stop her from crying. Peter would never get himself in the situation in the first place. And Sirius? Well, Remus thought Sirius was probably as bad as he was, actually. He wasn't good with emotions. He could barely manage his own. Still, Remus knew that the right thing to do was to wait and walk her back to the common room. So he did. It wasn't that Remus didn't feel sympathetic towards Marlene. The pressure on everyone felt enormous. You could hardly ignore it. It was more Remus's general distaste for whinging. And of course, he'd never liked being around people who cried. It made him nervous. Marlene looked much better when she came out of the bathroom. A bit flushed, but at least she was calm. "Sorry," she smiled at him shyly. "I feel silly." "It's okay," Remus shrugged. He wondered if he could give her bag back now. His arms really hurt, and his dodgy knee was playing up, never mind his hip. No, probably not. Not a very James thing to do, make a girl carry her own stuff. She didn't offer to take it back either. Luckily, they weren't too far from Gryffindor Tower. I am being silly, she said as they walked. I know I am. My stepdad hates it when I get wound up, says it winds him up. Then Mum gets the worst of it. Danny says I need to toughen up and stop acting like a baby, but who's Danny? Remus asked, a bit lost. My brother. She sounded surprised. I'm sure I've mentioned him. He's a beater for the Chudley Cannons. Oh, right. Yeah, I did know that. Remus nodded. Must be why you're so good. I'm not as good as Danny. Well, Remus tried to shrug under the weight of the books. You're only 14. Bet your brother wasn't as good at 14. You beat Sirius, and he's really good. Do you really think so? Yeah, Remus replied casually. Obviously. Gryffindor won the cup again this year, didn't they? Because of James. Yeah, well, James is mental, and you don't want to be like James. You won't tell Mary what I said, will you? Nope. He had already forgotten what she'd said about Mary, to be honest. She's my best friend, Marlene sniffed. And I'm not jealous of her or anything. She's just... Well, she likes to show off, you know. She's so funny and chatty and everything. Sometimes I feel a bit... she's already been out with Sirius, and now she's got that muggle boyfriend. And I think Professor Ferox likes her more than me. He's a teacher, Remus said. He likes everyone the same. Anyway, you're funny. James is always going on about how you get everyone laughing at Quidditch practice. Really? She seemed to flush again at this news. What about Sirius? Does he think I'm funny? Yeah, obviously. Remus nodded, pleased that she was finally smiling again. We all do. Your impression of McGonagall is the best. This seemed to satisfy her, and by the time they'd reached the common room, Marlene looked positively cheerful. I'll help you with Krups if you want, Remus said as they climbed through the portrait hole. We can do it tomorrow at lunch. Thanks, Remus. Marlene wrapped her arms around him again in a quick hug. She took her books and headed upstairs to her dorm room. Remus let out another sigh, sagging slightly with relief. Why did this always happen to him? Maybe he needed to start being meaner. Behind him, someone wolf whistled loudly. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Here he comes! Look out, ladies! Gryffindor's #1 heartthrob coming through! Sirius crowed as Remus went over to join his friends by the fire. James was immersed in a book, but looked up and winked at Remus. You're going to have to tell us your secret, Moony, Sirius continued. You seem to get all the girls. She's just a friend, and you know it. Where's Pete? Showering, James replied. Peeves attacked him with a jug of yesterday's custard. Ugh. Yep, that's the sound he made, James smirked, returning to his book. Thank Merlin you're back, Sirius addressed Remus. James has been so boring today. I'm revising, James said calmly, turning a page. You should be too. Psst. I'm done revising for today, Remus grinned. Want a game of Snap? Have I told you lately how much I love you? Shut up and get the cards. Chapter 55, 3rd year, Greyback. Friday the 28th of June, 1974. Unsurprisingly, Sirius achieved obscenely high marks in everything except astronomy, without lifting so much as a finger to study. By this point, Remus wasn't sure if Sirius genuinely did have some strange pureblood gift, or if he was just an unrecognised genius. Remus didn't mind either way. He himself came top in care of magical creatures, runes and history of magic. Second highest in arithmancy, after Sirius. Nicely done, kid! Ferox slapped him on the back at breakfast, the morning after results came out. My best student. Thanks, Professor. Remus grinned, feeling dizzy with pleasure. I've a few books you might like to borrow over summer. Pop up to my office before you leave, yeah? Teacher's pet, Sirius grinned as the tall, jovial man walked away, whistling a jaunty tune. Remus didn't respond. He was too pleased with himself. "Can't believe that it's still 4th year now," James said, cleaning his glasses on his robes. "Do you have to keep reminding me?" Sirius moaned, setting his knife and fork down. "Plenty to do over the summer," James replied. "It'll fly by." "What are you doing over the summer?" Remus asked suspiciously. "Planning next year's pranks, obviously," Sirius said, a little bit too quickly. "Got to keep ahead of the curve, Remu, my boy. We've got a reputation to maintain." It was the last official day of term, so Remus decided to ignore the fact that this was clearly a lie. He had all summer to be paranoid about the other 3 leaving him out. There was no need to worry yet. After breakfast, he wanted to go straight to see Professor Ferox, but thought that might come across as a little bit too eager. Plus, the other 3 would surely want to come with him, and Remus couldn't stand the thought of Ferox meeting Sirius and James. He would no doubt be charmed by their natural-born charisma, and wonder why he'd ever thought Remus was special at all. The foursome went upstairs and packed. That is, James, Remus and Peter packed. Sirius bounced around the room, trying to distract them, sending books and clothes flying, flicking his record player on and off. "It's getting done whether you like it or not," James chastised, hands on his hips in a very good imitation of his mother. "You'll do it for me, like last year," Sirius replied, standing on his bed and attempting to do pull-ups hanging off the bed frame. The ancient wooden beams creaked. Remus closed his own trunk. His corner of the room looked very bare without the usual chaos of books, papers, quills, and clothes strewn about it. He went over to the record player to have one last fond caress of his favourite album covers. Summers were so quiet without Sirius's music. Matron only ever liked to have the radio on once a week for the Radio 3 choral evensong. "Mooney," James said suddenly, "don't you have to go see Madame Pomfrey?" Yeah, not right now." Remus looked up, surprised. "Well, I mean, if you've finished packing, you might as well, right? When I've done Sirius's stuff, I was going to suggest we all go out on our brooms, and you hate flying, so—" "Oh, really? Okay then." Remus nodded, feeling unaccountably hurt. It wasn't at all like James to chase you out of the room. "We'll see you at dinner, right, Mooney?" Sirius asked, swinging forward and landing on his feet with the agility of a gymnast. "Yeah, suppose." Remus left the room, feeling as if he was being escorted from a party to which he was not invited. Fair enough, he didn't like flying much. But that didn't usually matter. Often he'd sit in the stands and read his book, while the others mucked about in the air. He wouldn't have minded doing that this time. He did have to see Madame Pomfrey anyway, so he went to the hospital wing, struggling to shake off the nasty feeling of exile. "You're very quiet, dear," the Medi-Witch commented as she completed his end-of-year checks. "Not looking forward to your holidays?" "No, not really," he replied. "You'll miss your friends," she clucked her tongue sympathetically. "It's a shame, I know. Still, I expect you've got lots of muggle pals to play with." Remus didn't bother answering. Madame Pomfrey was very kind, and hadn't a bad bone in her body. But she, like most adults, could be incredibly dense. He was privately hoping that the coming summer would be just as lucrative as the last. If Craig was still about, then perhaps he could make a bit of cash. He'd proved himself capable. He might even ask for more than just cigarettes. She gave him the same instructions as the year before. Eat well, rest, exercise. "I'll see you in early July," she smiled serenely, and he was comforted with the thought that at least he wouldn't be completely isolated from the wizarding community. That being dealt with, Remus considered returning to the dormitories. Perhaps they were all finished talking about him, or whatever it was they needed him out of the way for. Perhaps they had gone flying already. He didn't begrudge them that. James was of the opinion that if Sirius was in a temper, or too wound up, then a good hour's exercise was the best thing. And it generally was. Plus, It was one of the few times Peter didn't get left out. Despite his clumsiness on land, Pettigrew was a surprisingly good flyer. No doubt a result of James's relentless drilling. It was really the perfect time to go and see Professor Ferox, of course, but Remus dawdled. He felt suddenly quite shy, never having been to see a teacher alone before, unless he was in trouble, of course. Walking slowly, he eventually had to make a directional choice at a particular corridor, and decided he may as well get it over with. He knocked tentatively on Ferox's office door, even though it was slightly ajar. His heart hammered in his chest, and he found himself half hoping that his teacher wasn't there at all. Remus couldn't help but recall with some embarrassment how only a few weeks ago he had almost come running to Ferox in a moment of panic, only to recognise that it was a terrible idea at the very last minute. "Come in!" Ferox's cheery voice echoed from inside the room. Remus squared his shoulders and entered. "Mr. Lupin!" Ferox boomed. He was not sitting at his desk. Remus didn't think he'd ever seen Ferox seated, except at mealtimes. He was always moving. Just now, he was packing a small trunk, Achilles the Kneasel watching quietly from the windowsill. Even after a year of lessons with Ferox, Remus was still somewhat in awe of his teacher. His gigantic presence had not diminished, his mane of sandy curls was still as glorious, his face still heroic, with decisively carved features. "Hello, sir," Remus smiled as he entered, closing the door behind himself. "You asked to see me?" "Indeed I did," Ferox smiled broadly, nodding to a pile of 5 books on his desks. "Those are for you, if you've room in your trunk. Next year's set text, and a few other things I thought might interest you." Remus approached the desk, then fingered the leather-bound tomes carefully. "Thank you, Professor," he said quietly. He'd never received an enormous gift before. Ferox nodded, sitting down, finally gesturing that Remus do the same. "Butterbeer?" He withdrew some bottles from the bottom drawer of his desk. "Thank you, Professor," Remus repeated, accepting the bottle and sitting down. Achilles, on the window ledge, stretched, yawned, then curled up to sleep peacefully. Remus felt he ought to say something else. "Dumbledore normally sends me my books and stuff," he offered. "You didn't have to." "Well, I know you're a bit out of the loop during the holidays, so I thought you might appreciate a head start." Ferox continued to smile, his big, easy smile. Remus felt a strange kind of warmth fizzing in his abdomen, which was odd, because he hadn't so much as sipped his butterbeer yet. "Kind of you," he said, looking down at the books again, uncomfortable with too much eye contact. "I'm not being charitable, Remus, I promise," Ferox said reassuringly. "I know what it's like, you see. I came to Hogwarts with almost as little as you did. Muggle-born, raised by my nan. Course, she never understood anything I did here, bless her heart." Remus blinked. This was interesting news. He had assumed that most of the teachers at Hogwarts, in fact, most of the adults he respected, were all purebloods. It was an immense relief to learn that this wasn't the case. "Us rough kids have to stick together, huh?" Ferox winked at him. "Yeah," Remus continued to nod. "So, you never had problem getting a job or stuff like that, after school?" "Well, there are always going to be folks who can't see past your blood status, no matter who you are," Ferox said, a wry smirk in his voice. "But you learn pretty quick how to prove 'em wrong. Well, I don't need to tell you." "No," Remus agreed. He took a swig of his butterbeer. "So, are you an orphan too, Professor?" "I am. Common as muck, too. You wouldn't believe the flack I got for this accent back then." "Mary and Marlene think you sound like Paul McCartney," Remus said. Ferox laughed, a great joyful wheezing laugh. "I'll have to remember that one next time I'm on the pull." Remus felt himself blushing, hearing Ferox talk like that. "Just goes to show," Ferox said. "You never know how other people are going to see you, so never assume, huh?" Remus looked up at him curiously, but gave a small nod of understanding. The professor's expression softened. "Remus," Ferox said, so gently that it was unnerving. There's something else I wanted to talk to you about." Remus winced. He thought he knew what was coming. He'd been waiting for it since Christmas. "Perfectly fine if you don't want to talk about it," the teacher said. "Is it about my problem?" "In a manner of speaking," Ferox said, in a measured tone. "I don't know if you know this, but I knew your father Lyle quite well." Remus almost choked on his butterbeer. He hadn't quite expected that. Ferox continued. "Our work often overlapped, you see. I was young, hadn't long started in the control of magical creatures department. I knew him by reputation, of course, so I tried to learn what I could, though I never did master Boggarts quite like he did." "Okay." Remus didn't know what else to say. "Do you know much about him?" Remus looked away, out of the window. He didn't think he could talk and look at Ferox at the same time. "He was a Ravenclaw," he started, as if ticking off items off a list. "He was good at duelling, he was good at Boggarts and Dementors and Poltergeists, and he hated werewolves and wanted them all dead, and he—" Remus choked, wanting to stand up and leave the room. "Where did you hear all of that?" Ferox looked shocked. Remus looked at him. Though everything was swimming in tears now, it felt as though all of the nasty, spiteful thoughts he'd had since December had come pouring out like poison. "Darius Barebones," he said, rubbing his eyes roughly on the sleeves of his robes, forcing himself under control. "Met him at the Potter's Christmas party." "That old pisshead," Ferox snapped gruffly. He looked annoyed, but not at Remus. "I'm so sorry, Lupin. What a thing to hear. It's not true, you know." "He didn't hate them." "Well," Ferox tilted his head, as if trying to be diplomatic. "He was concerned about the danger werewolves posed to society. He was a sensible man, too sensible for hatred. You're a lot like him." Remus snorted bitterly at that. "It's true," Ferox said firmly. "He was a good man. He'd do anything for anyone." "Darius said he thought Lyle was bitten by Greyback, and that's why he killed himself." "You know about Greyback, then?" Remus nodded. Ferox looked very serious indeed. "I've heard that rumour. Wouldn't be surprised if Dumbledore started it to protect you, to be honest. Personally, I never believed it. Then when I met you, of course, it all became clear." "Is it that obvious?" Remus asked, raising his fingers to the scar on his face, over a year old now, but still stark and red. "No," Ferox shook his head. "Most wizards wouldn't know a werewolf if it jumped up and bit 'em." Ferox laughed, lifting the dark mood that had settled over the bright little office. "Your father's sense of humour, too." Remus smiled, weakly. "Professor?" "Yes?" "What happened to Greyback?" Ferox instantly turned serious again. "I'm afraid we don't know for certain. He's still alive, as far as the Ministry is concerned, and still wanted for crimes. I don't know if they'll ever catch him, to be honest. The man's a maniac, by all accounts." "Could he find me?" "Maybe." Remus was startled by Ferox's honesty. He didn't seem as concerned as most adults about protecting him from the harsher truths. "Does that frighten you?" the teacher asked. Remus shrugged. I think maybe I've always known that I'm going to meet him again." "You mustn't go looking." "I won't." Remus knew that was a lie, but he also knew that there was nothing Ferox could do to stop him. "If you have more questions, I want you to feel comfortable asking me," Ferox said. "There are some old newspaper clippings inside that top book." He nodded at the pile he'd gifted Remus. "I thought you ought to have them. Things like that oughtn't be kept from people, and you're old enough." "Thank you, Professor." I haven't upset you? No, Professor. Good lad. Ferox stood up, leaning over the desk, and squeezed Rumour's shoulder in a friendly sort of way. Try and have a good summer, yeah? I'll see you in September. Rumours nodded, feeling a bit dazed by the events of the past half hour. Nonetheless, he was quite grateful to be dismissed, and quietly left, carrying a heavy pile of books back upstairs to the common room. It was very quiet in Gryffindor Tower now. Most of the students had finished their packing and were no doubt outside enjoying the grounds. Remus's thoughts turned to Davy Gudgeon, and he squashed that down, one emotional crisis at a time. The marauders were gone too, Sirius's things now neatly packed away in his serpent chest. The room was stuffy and hot. Remus flicked his wand to swing the window open, and then went to sit on his bed and open the first book. Sure enough, pressed like dead leaves between the inside cover and the front page, 3 yellowing newspaper clippings. The Daily Prophet, April 1964. Werewolf attacks on the rise. Could your children be next? The Ministry of Magic has today confirmed that the recent spate of murders both in the Muggle and Wizarding communities is the work of dark creatures, namely werewolves. Ministry officials are particularly concerned that in many cases the victims of the attacks have been children under the age of 10. One official, respected dark creatures expert Lyle Lupin, has spoken out and criticised the ministry for lax and willfully neglectful safety measures. Lupin claims that the ministry's current werewolf registry is poorly managed and maintained, enabling certain anti-ministry fractions to use these loopholes to their advantage. The current number of victims is suspected to be 17, but set to the rise as the investigation continues, and the perpetrator continues to elude capture. A statement from the Aura's office is expected later today. The Daily Prophet, Obituaries, January 1965. Lyle Lupin, who has died aged 36, will be remembered as a world-renowned expert on non-human spirituous apparitions, and his extensive work with Boggarts and Poltergeist, Dementor Liaison, and, more recently, his efforts to reform the National Werewolf Registry. Lupin is survived by his wife, Muggle Hope Lupin, who he married in Cardiff in 1959. The couple have a young son, Remus John Lupin, born in 1960. The family has requested privacy during their time of grief. The Daily Prophet, February 1965. Auras on lookout for Greyback. The Aura's office is appealing to the wizarding public for any information pertaining the whereabouts of Fenrir Greyback, werewolf and suspected child murderer. Greyback is described as 6'3", very strong and unclean with the appearance of a vagrant. Wizards and witches are warned not to approach him and to consider Greyback extremely dangerous, even in human form. Aura Alistair Moody today made a statement indicating that the ministry believes Greyback to be travelling with a pack of werewolves, making him all the more dangerous. Greyback is known to have a preference for small children, but Mooney declined to comment on any speculation that the werewolves plan to raise an army. The ministry also declined to respond to allegations that they had Greyback in their custody last spring and failed to recognise the threat. Since the death of Lyle Lupin, an outspoken advocate for harsher sanctions on werewolves, there have been numerous efforts to improve recognition and registration of dark creatures. The first time he read them, Remus didn't even use his reading aid. The second, third and fourth time, he did, and over, as if there was something more to them, as if he could suck out the truth. He had no more answers than before, and a hot, angry ball of rage had begun growing inside his chest, burning brighter as he reread and reread. Hours passed, the room grew dark, and in the end, he never went down to the feast. Chapter 56, Summer 1974. Mooney, I hope everything's going okay with you this summer. Things are weird here. My parents aren't even interested in disciplining me anymore. They just keep attending all these meetings. Sometimes there are ours, sometimes they go out. I think they go to Bellatrix's place maybe, or the Malfoys. Regulus won't tell me what goes on. I think they've probably put a lip lock spell on him or something, because normally he couldn't resist lording something like that over me. I feel like something bad is going to happen. I know that sounds stupid, but something's definitely not right in this house. Something I'm glad you and James and Peter are such a long way away from. I'm going to try and ask James to stay again. I know it's mental, but honestly, if they're just going to ignore me anyway, what's the point? I haven't even been asked to be an usher at Sissy's wedding. All for the better, to be honest. So there's always the possibility that they've disinherited me and just forgotten to mention it. I can't wait until we're all 17, then we can just live together all the time, like at Hogwarts. I want to live on Carnaby Street, like in Melody Maker. You'll have to show me around. I know how the money works now, thanks to Muggle studies. Best, Sirius O'Black. Sirius, everything's okay here. Don't worry about me. I don't really know what you mean by something bad. Do you think they're gonna try and hurt you again? If you do, then definitely try and go to Potter's. Maybe they'll tell Dumbledore or someone. Sorry to disappoint you, but I've never been to Carnaby Street. St Edmunds is in Essex, and we only go into London once a year, usually to the museums. You'd probably like the Science Museum, full of Muggle inventions. Be careful, okay? Remus. Dear Moony, just so you know, Sirius is coming to stay with us this summer. He should be arriving this afternoon, so send his post here. Hope your summer's going well. You seemed a bit off at the end of term. I know you're going to say no, but Mum and Dad still say you're invited to stay whenever you like, and we could always come and get you or just visit. Don't want you to be out alone there, mate, especially these days. James. James, what do you mean these days? Is that what Sirius was on about with his family meetings? You know what the Blacks are like. They just love secrets. It's probably nothing. They're probably planning Regulus's betrothal or something like that, and Sirius wants out of the way. Anyway, like I told Sirius, don't worry about me. Dumbledore and Madame Pomfrey reckon this is where I'm safest, and they're the ones in charge of me, right? Obviously, I'd like to spend the summer at yours, but it's not happening, so can you please drop it? Don't come here either. Just trust me. R. Dear Remus, sorry if I upset you, mate. I didn't mean to. I'll stop asking about it if you want me to. Hope you're having a good summer anyway. We all wish you were here. You're right. If Dumbledore says you're safe there, then you're safe there. Dad says Dumbledore might be the only one we can trust soon enough. Take care of yourself, James. Hi, Moony. 4 Marauders are definitely better than 3. It's great having Sirius in here and all, but it's like we always have to do whatever he wants. I'm mostly just lucky that Mum lets me see them at all after Phil left home. I got a postcard from her the other day. She's in America. Can you believe that? She said to say hello to you. So, hello from Phil. Peter. Moony, why did you have a go at James? He thinks you didn't mean to come off like that, but I know what you're like, you moody git. What's up? Sirius O'Black. P.S. How come Philomena says hello to you and not to any of us? You're such a bloody ladies' man. Remus, I know you got my last letter. The owl came back, and the Potter's owls are even more reliable than my family's. Why aren't you replying? Sirius O'Black. Remus, please let us know you're okay. James. Moony? Craig had been nicked at some point over school year, and Remus returned to find that Craig's mate, Steve, was now in charge of the criminal element at St Edmunds. He was a good deal uglier and stupider than Craig. Bit tall for Robin now, ain't ya? Steve squinted at Remus. Still skinny, Remus replied, holding his nerve. How'd you get all them scars? Fighting. Steve laughed meanly. Yeah, right. We do a little toff like you. Fuck off. Remus took a step closer. I ain't no toff. He was as tall as a 16-year-old, maybe even a few inches taller. Yes, he was weedy, but he was holding his ground, and Steve was starting to look a lot less sure of himself. "All right," the big boy said, tilting his head backwards, away from Remus. "Calm down, mate, you're in." Remus sneered at him, turned and walked away satisfied. Not much had given him satisfaction so far that summer. He felt more isolated than ever before, and angrier than he had been in a long time. Remus almost hated Ferox for giving him the information he had on the last day of term, so that he could not make sense of it, or do anything about it. There was no one to tell, he was forbidden from mentioning Hogwarts to anyone at St. Edmund's, and he didn't even know where to begin with the other marauders. The letters infuriated him, and he balled every single one of them up in his fist, then threw them away. He couldn't bring himself to read, or watch TV, or even touch his homework. He felt as though he had boundless pent-up energy, like an animal stalking the length of his cage. It built inside him, heating up until he was blazing with the desire to lash out and beat the shit out of the next person who crossed him. Fortunately, most of the St. Edmund boys seemed to sense this. Though Remus barely spoke a word to anyone, the kids avoided him like the plague. So he sought out Steve. Their first job was an easy one. He didn't even need to be small for it. They stole a car, and all he had to do was climb in with the rest of them. They drove around for the most of the night, smoking and drinking from a bottle of vodka they'd pinched from the off-licence some weeks prior. Remus decided that he liked smoking. It made him look tougher, and kept his hands busy. He liked rolling cigarettes, and he liked the way they burnt inches from his lips. He liked breathing plumes of smoke and thought of Ferox chasing dragons in Romania. The other boys warmed to him after they got used to his quietness and his general odd manner. He was still the youngest in the group, and they began to treat him like a little brother, plying him with fags and booze. Remus got properly drunk for the first time that summer, and they all laughed as he stumbled out in the park and sympathised when he puked his guts out the next morning. When they got drunk, they liked to fight too, which suited Remus. In the dark, up on the common, they threw themselves round, belting out Who songs or the Jam, or even football chants if they were feeling particularly mindless. None of them seemed to care if Remus was too young or too skinny, and none of them treated him like he was an invalid because of his scars. Sometimes you just needed to get bashed about a bit, and at the end of the night, they all staggered home friends. The hot summer weeks passed in a chaotic blur. Remus spent most of his nights out with Steve and his gang, and his days sleeping off hangovers, trying to keep out of Matron's way. He didn't think about Hogwarts. He did very little thinking at all. "Gotta get you some proper togs, Lupin," Steve slurred one night. "Can't have you looking like a ponce all summer." Remus looked down at his standard issue St. Edmund's jeans and grey t-shirt. They were sick on his plimsolls. Had he done that? He couldn't remember. "Ain't got the cash, have I?" he responded, searching for the cigarette he'd tucked behind his ear only a few minutes ago. Or, at least he thought he had. "So?" Aggie, a short, chubby boy who reminded Remus of Peter, shrugged. "My mate works in a warehouse down Southend. We'll get you some proper gear." And they really did. For once, Remus looked like all the other boys his age. Not in second-hand clothes, but brand new. Bright blue drain-pipe jeans, a button-down shirt, knock-off Ben Sherman, but as good as the real thing, white braces, and black bother boots. They shaved his head right down, even shorter than Matron did. "You'll at the business?" Sirius caught him under his arm, rubbing his head with rough knuckles. When the moon came, and Madame Pomfrey saw him, she pursed her lips. "I'll say nothing about the outfit," she said primly. "But I don't like the look of all these bruises. You must tell me if the other boys are hurting you." He just shook his head and waited for her to lock the door. He could already feel his blood boiling as the change began. The next day, he was too weak to move. Madame Pomfrey insisted on staying the whole day to watch him, even arranging for a bed to be brought down to his little cell. Hangovers had nothing on transformations, Remus thought to himself. He'd have killed for a fag, though. Bored and too tired to be angry, he finally reached for a book. The 3 slips of newspaper fell out again, and he quickly slammed the cover shut before Madame Pomfrey could see. Greyback. That was why he was so angry, he realised. In the first moment of clarity he'd had all summer. In fact, Greyback was pretty much the reason behind everything that had ever gone wrong in Remus's life. Where could he be? How could you hunt a werewolf? There were plenty of books on that in Hogwarts library, but Remus had always avoided them before, frightened of what they might say. Well, tough. He'd have to stop being squeamish about stuff like that. He had to stop hiding from himself, stop letting everyone walk all over him. If he was ever going to... Yes. He was going to kill Greyback, to hunt him down and then put him down, just like his father had wanted. Lyle Lupin would not have died in vain. A bolt of adrenaline shot through Remus as he thought about it. It was much better than rage. It might take years before he was ready. He knew that. And he'd need money. As soon as Remus was fit, he approached Stee once more. "All right, Lupin, me old pal?" The older boy smirked, with yellow teeth through a haze of sweet, green-smelling smoke. "Bloody hell, what happened to you?" He frowned at Remus's fresh cuts. "Never mind that," Remus growled, no longer stressing his old accent. "Last summer, Craig did over so many off-licences and pubs that I had a trunk full of fag packets. This year I've got bugger all. You not as hard as Craig or something?" "Oi!" Stee sat up, hooking his thumbs behind his braces. "Watch it." "No, you watch it," Remus snarled, showing teeth. "I've got 2 weeks left, no need to stock up. You in or not?" End of chapter 56.